So happiness, obviously, what could be about? Well, that's interesting. It's puzzling at the same time. If you look at, all the great thinkers of history that have written upon happiness, what is puzzling is you could make, a 2-column list with every possible definition and find the exactly opposite definition by another great thinker. So, does it mean that we really cannot define happiness? This is also a common thing. Say, oh, no, let's not attempt to define happiness. Everyone finds happiness in their own way. That also seems to be a little bit too easy, isn't it? But, Henri Bergson, a French philosopher, said, well, all the great thinkers of history have left happiness in the vague so that everyone can redefine it in their own terms. I find it a little bit not so satisfactory, because if, as Aristotle said, it's the goal of goals. Every goal is to achieve something in order to feel a sense of fulfillment, eudaimonia, accomplishment, flourishing. And if you don't know what it is, it's like shooting arrows in the dark. You might hit the target, you don't even know why. And then you start speaking like Parisian intellectuals that are so much against happiness. But when I wrote my little book, you could not believe the debate. It was a national debate. And my sort of opponents, they wrote a tribune in one of the main French weekly saying, the dirty works of happiness. Stop bugging us with telling us we must be happy, imposing on us the duty of being happy. How terrible. How you dare. We are unhappy and glad to be so. That makes a meaningful, romantic life. So, but still, they still say, even those who can't care a damn for happiness, there's those magic moments in life. And that's what we need to do, and the rest can be boring, it's nice, you see the contrast and all that. But yes, okay, magic moments. And there's some very trivial magic moments, all those magazines, they say, what makes you happy? And someone said, eating a plate of spaghetti, okay, forget about those. But some people say, walking on the snow under the stars. Well, that sounds quite good. But why a magic moment? There may be reasons for that. You might think, why did I feel so good? A kind of peace. And maybe it's a sense of what? In that moment, there was less inner conflicts. Possibly I feel at peace with myself. Whether I'm alone with some good friends walking under the stars on the snow. Maybe a sense of harmony with others. Certainly harmony with nature. So, a moment of inner peace that has surely some characteristics. No conflict. My mind was not flooded with aggressivity, resentment, ruminations. If it was, you would feel even more miserable. You would say, not about a magic moment, you would say, here I was in this beautiful place and I felt so bad. So, clearly, it was about a state of mind, of harmony and so forth. So those have meaning. And why not cultivating that? Why should it be just fleeting moments and then get bored the rest of the time? So cultivating also, they hate that, the French intellectual. They said they are against the endless cultivation of oneself. They side with Emily Bronte, who when she heard about cultivating happiness from her doctor, she said, oh, you cultivate that like potatoes? So she didn't feel very much that it could be cultivated as a skill. So then it seems that if Aristotle and the Buddhist thinkers, like so as the Dalai Lama, who says, no matter what, you don't wake up in the morning thinking, may I suffer the whole day, and if possible, my whole life. Whatever you do, when he says happiness is the goal of life, what it means? Because the same French intellectual say there's so many more things that are more important than happiness. Justice and passions and creativity. Well, that's the way they find their happiness, isn't it? So it's like You know, in a piece of Molière, there's Monsieur Jourdain, who was so proud when he was taking lessons of literature that he was doing some prose. He didn't know he could write prose. He was not aware that he was writing prose, so he felt that what he was writing was so much more noble if you call it poetry or prose. So likewise, you are seeking happiness in certain ways, but that's still the goal of goals is that kind of sense of fulfillment. Whether you take a cup of tea, whether you meet some friends, whether you undertake a project, a human relationship, you do it because you hope that at the end of the tunnel there will be something better, some kind of, or at least less suffering. Even the French intellectuals who write books against happiness, they don't do that to make everyone, including themselves, suffer more. They think we have to set things straight, it's some kind of improvement. So in a way, yes, we want this kind of increased well-being. So therefore, if that's the goal of goals, flourishing, accomplishment, then it would be nice to have at least some idea of what it could be and what certainly it is not. So there are many confusion about it. Looks alike, false friends. One of the clearest examples is pleasure and happiness. Nothing wrong with pleasure, but it's just not the same. And if you look at the characteristic of a pleasurable experience, it's something that is very much linked with outer conditions. It can change with places, with people, with time, and it is vulnerable to sudden change of circumstances. Something very pleasant becomes unpleasant. It also changes as you experience it. You can take many examples. Listening to a beautiful piece of music, how ecstatic, but 24 hours, imagine, non-stop. Or you go under the snow, in the snow, under the stars, very cold, and then you come and take a hot shower. How blissful. 24 hours under the hot shower. Incredible Belgium chocolate, one piece, 2 pieces, you're satiated. 25 pieces, forget it. So it changes, it becomes something else. And also it could be experienced at the cost of others' well-being. You could feel great pleasure and everybody is suffering terribly, or even you could use others in a negative way. So there's no basic relation with sense of a way of being. So now if you think of happiness not as this endless succession of pleasurable experiences, which are kind of a recipe for exhaustion. All these guys jumping, I'm so happy, and then they collapse. So, a way of being, what does that mean? Something that doesn't really depend. Instead of depending on the fleeting, changing conditions, it gives you the resources to deal with the ups and downs of life. The more you experience it, instead of vanishing away, the more it becomes deep, stable, understood. So it's a kind of aspect of cultivation, reinforcing, deepening, becoming clearer, more stable. And it's also something that somehow can be shared in a way. The French philosopher Alain said the best gift you can do to others is to be happy yourself, because somehow there will be this emotional contagion, this empathic resonance. Someone smiles, you smile. Someone feels like terrible. You do feel something about that. So it's a way of being. And ways of beings can be learned. Ways of beings is not just one thing. There's no such thing as happiness. There's no happiness center in the brain. There is a cluster of qualities or components that together contribute to that way of being. So then how you will recognize those? Basically through direct experience. If you make a seminar, as many people do sometimes, okay, let's come for a weekend, we are going to cultivate jealousy for 2 days, full days. A seminar meditating on jealousy. We promise you that we'll feel more jealous at the end of the 2 days. Who is going to come? We know instinctively that even we say that passions makes a colorful life, that you don't want to be more jealous, have more animosity, more resentment, more arrogance, more craving, and all that. Okay, now if we say, let's cultivate loving kindness, let's cultivate inner strength, inner peace, some kind of freedom from those chain of thoughts that sort of whirlpool in your mind, those ruminations, hopes and fears that leaves you not a moment of peace. You say, wow, that sounds sort of neat. So we know intuitively that. Some people will argue that that makes a colorful life. You don't want to get rid of those. It will be so boring. Some people have this idea of happiness is